properly, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been one of our great pleasures to be able to do these with our wine club and for anyone else who's interested in joining. And thank you so much, Teresa, for taking the time out of your evening to talk to us about your amazing wines. It is no secret that I'm a huge fan of yours, so I'm going to try and be cool. And as always, everyone, if you want to ask any questions at any point, feel free to unmute yourselves and just ask them if you'd like. Alternatively, I'm keeping an eye on the chat box. You can pop them in the chat and I'll make sure your questions get answered. But we're just going to go through a rundown of everything that is Georg Breuer. So I'm going to pass you over to Teresa. And I guess a good way to start would be, sorry, I'm just letting one person in. I think a good starting point would just be to talk about the history of your family winery, because I know has a long history and it's particularly exciting relating to the history of German winemaking as well. So over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. That's so nice of you. And I hope to give you a little bit of an idea about, of course, us, but also, the region, the Riesling, whatever you want to know. But let's start with us. The winery is called Georg Breuer, that I am luckily part of. And Georg was my grandfather, but he was actually the second generation of our family working with wine. So at the end, I am only the fourth generation, which is, if you compare it to like the long history of our region, where there's over 1,000 years of winemaking, we are still youngsters, rookies on that long way. But we have gone through quite interesting changes with our winery, because we started, or my great-grandfather started as the manager of a wine merchant company. It was a company that was called differently. The core name was Scholl and Hillebrand, but they did a lot of brands and bottlings under different names. And he was not really a winemaker. He was the one running the business. And they were buying in wines, which was very, very easy being located at Rüdesheim, because the natural way to transport wines was on the river, and the Rhine River, the biggest river in Germany, is like just in front of us. So it was actually logistically a quite smart move to work with trading, being next to the river. And they were dealing with wines more actually in lower quality, bigger quantity. There was also a lot of Liebfrauenmilch running through our cellars. So we were also part of that little bit dark section of the German wine history when it comes to quality. But there was also always wines with quite a high quality approach, and a big love behind. And there was always some own winemaking. Just a tiny bit in my great-grandfather's days, because it was really just like from the vineyards around the village, a little bit here and there, which was very natural. More or less every family in our village has vineyards in their like normal daily life. Many of them are not working the vineyards today anymore, but at least they own vineyards. And and this at the end was what my grandfather was then really focusing on, our own vineyards. The Second World War changed a lot in our town because it was heavily bombed. So a lot was destroyed, and what was not destroyed were the vineyards. And we were extremely lucky because our cellars were also perfectly in good condition. So my grandfather could actually start to work with more vineyards and actually have a home for the wines as well. So he was then paying much more attention to the farming part of our business, and realized actually that if you have your hands already on the grapes, you're so much more able to improve things, decide things, individualize things. So he really loved that idea. He fell in love by coincidence with winemaking or grape growing, because he really had to do it and experienced that it is actually a chance to work on quality in a quite different way. And he passed that on to my father, and my father then was the one who stopped any of the merchant works aside. He really focused on vineyards. He fell in love with top vineyards. He really experience that our vineyards in our region, well, that's not a news, that was clear already like 100 years before, but he really got quite sensible for the quality of unique vineyard sites. And whenever he had a chance to take over some more great vineyards, he was doing that. So he expanded our winery and developed a clear vision for a quality standard of dry wines that should be like easily comparable to other Grand Cru wines from the world. So he had that mission to really put the level high and work on the best possible sites to bring out the best possible dry wines. And unfortunately, he passed away way too early in 2004. Still with, I think, a head full of ideas, but he already started to place these ideas in our winery, and he gathered a wonderful team around him, so that I was able to continue in an age that I haven't, well, it's a while ago now, it's 18 years ago, and I was 20 and I had no clue really what to do, but with that fantastic people around me and this huge heritage of fantastic vineyard sites, here we are still. So something worked right, which is year by year a new challenge, which we love. But since my father was so ahead with his ideas and this straight vision of high class dry wines, it's not that I really could relax, but he was steps ahead, and I could feel these steps like slowly. And I studied in Geisenheim, in our neighbor town, which is the most famous village for wine growing. I had a chance to study there while I was working in the estate, and we are still in the game. That's the story.
No, it's such an amazing thing for you to be able to do, because I guess historically high quality German wines wouldn't have been dry, and having someone sort of who had that foresight to really pave the way for you to be able to come in and do what you do now, which is create incredible single vineyards dry Rieslings. It's incredible. It's an amazing thing, because that wasn't the norm at all. Well, from what I can gather from what older vintages of Rieslings that I've drunk and the history that I've read about. You definitely paved the way. How did you feel taking over at such a young age? Was it something you always thought you'd do, or was it sort of like it happened and you just went with it?
Well, my father was 57 when he passed away, and he was not sick or anything. It really just happened. And he was a very, very, very energetic person. So nobody really thought that this life would end in such an early stage. So it was not really the point of his life to actively motivate me to be part of the future of the winery, but it was pretty clear that I have a sister as well, but she left our region in a very young age already, and I was the one that always felt home at home. I loved like being in our area, and I was about to start an education to become a vintner winemaker straight after school, but then I last minute did not. I already signed a contract at a dear colleague, and I had to tell them that it was maybe too early, because I felt it's really like, if I started now, I will not do anything else in my life, which stressed me out a little bit in the age of 19. But it was kind of like in me that I wanted to go into that direction. It was just about the timing. And then, well, life takes decisions for you sometimes a bit different than you would have it on your plan. But it was pretty... it was pretty obvious for me to just start in the winery, and not due to the inner wish of making great wines in the first go. It was more in that inner feeling of feeling very close to my father, continuing what he did, and not in the way that I wanted to be as fantastic as he was. I will never be, but just to be close to him. And that was the beginning. And then I realized how home I feel. And that's good.
No, that's wonderful. And I mean, your wines always, I find they have a really distinctive style that I think is quite clearly down to you as well. So it's wonderful that you can kind of take on his amazing legacy, but also create your own style within it as well. Which I guess kind of so Teresa's very kindly provided a really wonderful PowerPoint with some pictures of the vineyard and the winery. So I'm going to just share my screen now. The last time I did this, the winemaker got confused by my background because it was of some vineyards. So this is not Teresa's vineyards. These are Teresa's vineyards.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, that's Ribera Sacra. Right, let me just go into this. Right, so because I think for everything that you do, it's very much the wines. Please tell me if I'm wrong, but your wines come from the vineyard. Like it's all, everything is down to the sites that they're from and the amazing vineyards that you work with. So I just want to sort of talk to you about how you choose to farm those vines, and I know quite a lot of them are historically your family's vines, but you also do work with other places, and also about the Rheingau in general and how it's, what makes it so unique.
Yeah, well, this picture actually tells everything already. This is a picture that if you have maybe the Rüdesheim estate in your glass, is really showing what you're having in your glass. The village that you can see just next to the Rhine River is Rüdesheim. It's a small village, but quite lively, which is great. And you can see the morning sun rising. So, and this happens in the east, so the river is straight south and the vineyards are facing south, which is kind of like the secret to our region, but especially to Rüdesheim, because Rüdesheim is the village where we have really these extremely south exposed sites. What you're seeing on the picture is quite comfortable looking. These are the sites that are not the steepest ones. It's more like a rolling landscape, and the Rheingau has two terroir characters. We have these bit softer steep vineyards where we have a little bit higher, less top before the quartzite and slate rock starts, and then as steeper the vineyards get, the more expressive the actual stones are getting. So we have these two different terroirs, which is a huge privilege to be able to work on these two. And we have our vineyards spread. It's not that we're just in the very steep parts, which are like obviously the most expressive sites and wines, but we also love the ones that are kind of like the very, very real ones, the very original ones, and typical ones as well. So it is really about that diversity, and we're able to work in 3 different villages. Of course, everything started in Rüdesheim. This is really what where we're home, and you can perfectly see it on that map. So these the vineyards in Rüdesheim, as you can see, the river is really running easily flat, more or less from east to west, so 100% south exposed sites. And you can also see that the structure of the region is changing. Everything from Rüdesheim to Wiesbaden is quite wide and looks very big. And then in Rüdesheim, the slopes are steepening up and it looks very narrow from Rüdesheim to Lorch. So we are really in that connection point where we have that change of terroir. So cool being in Rüdesheim where this change happens. But we're also in Lorch, which is the west corner of the region, where it's only steep slopes in the vineyards. And then we're also in Rauenthal, which is a tiny village above Eltville in the back. So from the river, about 5 kilometers in the back. So with these 3 different villages and vineyards around the villages, we're really expressing the diversity of the region. And the region is tiny. We only have 3,300 or 3,200 hectares in the whole region, which is really nothing. And they're all stretched along the river. And it's a stretch from Wiesbaden to Lorch that is about not even 30 kilometers. So it is really a very compromised region, but in that very short distance, it offers a lot because of these two different steepness level, two different terroirs. And then it's always a little bit differing if you have a little bit rockier soils, more slate, more quartzite, or a bit richer style. For example, in Eltville or above Eltville in Rauntal, we have quite powerful soils with a lot of nutrition for the wines and always a little bit higher humidity. And in Rüdesheim and Lorch, it gets extremely dry and poor in the soil. So that's super interesting and exciting for us. And what is of course so exciting is that we're working mainly with Riesling in all of these villages. So it's not that this corner is better for Riesling, it's just different. And this is so great that we have actually one grape where we can learn and try to understand what the signature of a particular place tastes like. And this is really a unique challenge year by year.
Yeah, it's wonderful to taste your wines, especially your single vineyard wines, side by side from one year, because they really give you a snapshot of where they're from. I mean, I think I love Riesling. And I think one of the reasons I love Riesling so much is because I think it's very good at telling you where it's from. Like, it's very terroir expressive, and you can taste Rieslings from all around the world, and they literally scream at you like, this is where I'm from, which is a wonderful thing, you know, as long as they're made in quite like a sort of hands-off kind of way. So looking at this map, so I remember once working with another importer that specialized in German wines, and they were talking about the similarities in the way that Burgundy and the Rheingau and the Mosel kind of operate, in how different the soil can be and how drastically the terroir can change in a very small sort of distance.
Yeah.
Would you say that's pretty like a fair comparison in terms of how it works?
Yes, absolutely. It is extremely diverse, and it is not just the soil; it's also the exposition of the sites, the altitude levels that are changing. So yeah, there are many facts that like form around a Rheingau Riesling, but still we are close enough, and due to the fact that we are such strong focusing that one grape, we are really able to show a Rheingau Riesling, but with these very, very individual characters, if you allow it to. Of course, if you do a very, a kind of winemaking that is a lot of making, then you would overload. Yes. Then you would really overload these very fine differences. But if you really try to be as lazy as possible, and this is actually what we do, then the vineyards really have a chance to step up for their uniqueness and terroir.
I think as well, that point that you're making there is also one of the reasons why historically, I mean, speaking from the UK rather than any other place, but you know, Riesling wasn't that popular for a long time because it was very heavily made and wasn't particularly, you know, individual and expressive, and all the stuff that was quite interesting was very expensive and we didn't really get here. Whereas now, you know, there's so many more winemakers like yourself who are all about, like you say, keep just not doing too much, just letting it do its thing and not getting too involved, and the wines really speak for themselves. So you are fully organic, is that right, in the way that you work?
Yes, not since ever. We've started working organic in 2006, actually in our flatter vignettes, these like that, because we thought it's easier. You're just faster when it's needed to be fast in the spraying routines. And 2006 was a pretty dry summer, so we got very confident that we can do it perfectly. But we still kept on going only in the flat parts of our vineyards, which is 50%. So we're more or less split half and half. And then in 2011 we started all over the winery to work full organic. We're not organic certified; we're sustainable certified. Just because we had to decide, and I somehow felt that with that sustainable frame, we're actually gathering even more than just an organic certification, because we're really spotting on more or less everything in the process. So this we are since 2013. So yeah, good 10 years. But before that, we have also been working very, very sensitive. And I think this is also something that many producers do, also without being certified, because we, especially in the last years, are realizing more and more how much care we have to take of our vineyards to be able to work them anymore. And there was also a generation before a quite different philosophy on that especially in sites like the one that you can see, which is really flat, there was always the goal to like really bring a massive amount of grapes out of, and of course, if you have huge yields, the individuality of taste gets lost as well. So it's it all grows together. And yeah, these pictures beautifully show the other half of our vineyards. Yeah, these are the steep parts, the Grand Cru sites, Berg Rotland and Berg Rosenegg, two of our top sites in Rüdesheim, straight next to each other actually. But also on the other picture, you could see it was harvest time and we're picking with hand. And this is also part of our philosophy, that we really want to control in the best possible way what we're bringing home to make our wines out of. And machines are in many working steps extremely great, and there's also fantastic picking machines today, but still hand and eyes are irreplaceable when it comes to like a final check, and also when it comes to the way you're working your vineyards. We're quite intensively working on lively soils, especially in the flat part where we have a bit of top soil, where we can actually work with some plantings that we particularly bring out. And if you then with a heavy harvester drive through and just riddle everything from the vines, you're really you're challenging your vineyards with a lot of power that then like overruns them. So we try to do it soft and gentle, and be very, very safe with what we're bringing home.
I was going to say as well, because with hand picking as well, you can make your first selection in the vineyard, which then makes life a little bit easier for you when you get it into the winery too, because you don't have to do as an intensive check. So it's just sort of helps in every way, shape or form.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to ask as well, so we go back to this because I love this photo. Go back to so you've got these really beautiful Grand Cru sites, and then you also have the estate Riesling is not, well, I think it's not from a single vineyard, it's from a sort of
no it's from 5 sites that are located around the village, all connected really to Rüdesheim. And the ones that you see on the picture now, they're a little bit further west where the slopes are steepening up.
And how do you sort of approach the winemaking for each plot? Is it sort of like, do you sort of work everything the same, or is it just depends on how it is and which certain sites get made in a different way? And
well, it's timing of course is very individual, because even though it is more or less all Riesling, the season can be pretty different from the flatter parts close to the forest, for example, to the very exposed, very sunny sides in the steepest part. So we try to adjust the timing in the best possible way, but it's not really that we have, when we're working the vineyards, a different philosophy on the different plots. We're just trying to be awake and trying to match what each vineyard needs in timing. And the only difference that we actually really do in winemaking is that we age everything from the steep vineyards in big old German casks, and the flatter parts generally end up in stainless steel. If we have some barrels left empty, then of course we're happy to fill them as well, but this is kind of like the most easiest rule, that steep ends up in big barrel and flatter vineyards end up in stainless. But the way we treat the wines is also not really different, and this is part of our philosophy as well, because we don't want to build a style of a wine by different kind of winemaking influences. We want to do it all the same, of course, always like individually adjusted to a need of a vineyard, but that is more due to climate differences, and not really because we want to build a style or so.
So, yeah, it's going to say they like I said to you before, it's not about a style per se, but it's just, you know, your whole approach. They have such a cohesive, they all make sense when you taste them together, because they all have that sort of very clean, very sort of expressive,
and that's just in them. That is the great part of it. We take our hands off and the wines offer that.
Yeah, you take your foot off the gas, and they only offer you what you could possibly want in return. Sorry, OC's asking a question, which is, what's the main reasoning behind steep in old barrel and flat in stainless?
Well, we have lower yields in the steep parts. Also not really because we push it extremely to very, very low yields. It's more the fact that the vines are growing under completely different nutrition situation and the watering situation. So the steeper the vineyards are, the less water they get, and the deeper the roots have to grow, the more reduced the growing above the earth is. So the vines kind of limit themselves and save their energy a little bit. So the steeper slopes are bringing smaller clusters with smaller berries, but is super intense flavor and concentration. And this is at the end what is for us always then the very simple reason why we're keeping these juices in barrels, because there they have constantly to work with oxygen, which is more work than just laying in a closed stainless steel tank. So that's why, because we have that more intense juice with higher extracts and more concentration, where we can kind of like see that the aging in barrel, and this we only do due to the microoxidation that is happening, is actually adding up something to it. The juices have constantly to work with oxygen, so they're actually building shoulders and a backbone, and even more ripening potential, while the ones which are maybe a little bit like higher in yield, not high at all, we don't have any high yield vineyards, but a little bit higher, more with a more juicy, easygoing character, age beautiful in stainless steel, and bring a little bit more like outgoing, younger character into the wine.
Thanks. That's I was really glad that OC asked that, because I was wondering the same thing, thinking what the difference would be.
Yeah, and sometimes we just try to like do it, break it down to do it easy, so steep barrel, flat stainless.
Like the one rule, just keep it as simple as possible.
Yes.
There's a great picture that I spotted here. So I wanted to ask about this, because you don't really, I mean, I've never, your wines are all dry, and I'm just quite curious about the different ripening levels that you work with in the vineyard, and I'm assuming this is what this picture relates to.
Well, yes and no. Well, it shows definitely that we have not just perfect grapes in our vineyards. There are some years where that happens. 2020, for example, was a vintage where we had such a stressless picking. It was incredible. But normally, due to the fact that we are close to a river, that there's humidity around, there's also always some rotten fruit around. If the quality of the rottenness is great and turns into botrytis, we're of course happy to keep these berries. So we actually do some sweet wines, but only when botrytis pops up, and then it's only on a dessert wine level. So there's no like in between thing. There's either dry terroir driven wines or very sweet concentrated wines that are made from noble rot fruit. So the middle picture shows what like a perfect botrytis looks like, which we would keep and bring home. And it is a little bit more that the one on the greener picture shows a perfectly ripe fruit in a flatter vineyard, where we don't have these extreme sun exposed sides. And on the right hand side you can see these very yellow tiny berries, very small fruit that are result of the steepest slopes. And I can still remember when I was picking always in my school holidays together with my father, we were still sometimes selecting by color. So there was sometimes like different goes through the vineyards, and in the first go we only picked out the very yellow ones to give the greener ones a chance to ripen more. I am not a big fan of that actually, because I think I myself experienced that a grape can be beautifully yellow and it can be horribly green next to it, and you taste them and the green one is the sweeter one. So nature is fooling us sometimes, and it is getting tougher because the sun gets another intensity, and we have definitely more sunshine, and sun without always changing taste or sugar levels is definitely also changing the color of the berry, and this misleads you sometimes. And I think at the end, when we're doing different picking goes, what we've experienced as well before, at the end we were blending them together anyhow, because in the juice from the very yellow berries 15 years ago was lacking crispiness and tightness, and the juice from the very green ones, generalizing now, was lacking smooth ripeness and power. So what we've been doing is blending them together. So now we trust actually the development of the vineyard and bring that colorful mix of healthy grapes home, and hope for the best field blend that we can get.
So a healthy grape can come in all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, correct. Correct.
You talk about having much more intense sunshine, and I guess it's always a bit stressful to talk about global warming, but it's definitely something that's affecting everyone and everything. How have you found? Because that's probably a good time to talk about different vintages as well, because the 2019 is the estate redesign, but the Sals de Erd is 2020. So was there quite a dramatic difference between those two vintages?
Well, not dramatic. They were both hot and dry. This is the new trend that we can see.
That's a new thing.
And well, generally we're on the winning side. We have had so many fantastic vintages the last years, fantastic in result and in the quality. Tough to work sometimes, sure, but this is also part of the game, and this is why we're in the game, and why not wine bottles are growing on trees. It's grapes that we have to vinify. So it's our part. 19 and 20 were both really hot, as 18 was as well. 19 was definitely, you could sense on 19 that it was the second hot vintage in a row. In 18, we had a super, super long hot summer, and we had really a lot of juice. When we were picking, so surprised by the amount of juice that was running out of these crazy grapes. And you could see that the vines kind of like overworked themselves a little bit. So they the yield was reduced in 19 by the vines, but also by frost and hail and quite heavy weather conditions. Not so much in our region. We were pretty lucky, but it was a super small vintage yield wise, with an extremely high concentration, which was really great. And timing wise, we were quite normal, which is always important for us, because the weather during the harvesting season is influencing actually much more than the weather during the whole other growing part of the season. So we had we were picking in a quite late moment, which means that we're starting middle of September. It's still earlier as it was 20 years ago, but it is more normal. And during that time, we already have a quite nice day and night temperature difference, which stabilized the acidity on a lovely balance. And this lovely acidity was really the key to vintage 19, because it kicked the concentration of the juice in a super lovely fresh way. So it's a pretty cool combo between high acidity and high concentration that really makes marathon runners out of the wines, I guess. And 20 was more smooth. It was not driven by any like extremes. It was, I think we all had enough new challenges in mind due to COVID popping up, but the vineyards actually treated us in a very gentle way. And it was a pretty calm season and a lovely picking period. The grapes were developing super slow and nice and extremely healthy, not with that like inner tension as the 19 was driven by, but 20 was really the headline for 20 is balance. It's just everything at the right spot in a beautiful balance.
So I've had the great pleasure of tasting the Sals de Erde, which we'll start talking about in a sec, and it's beautifully balanced. I think it's like a really beautiful way of describing it. And the 19s are really sort of vibrant and quite lively and energetic. But I mean, they're still beautifully balanced, but they seem very like open and
on their way. Yes.
Yeah. Whereas a 2020 that I've tried is a little bit more restrained, a little bit more sort of laid back. But yeah, I mean, it's really wonderful to taste sort of two vintages that had kind of a lot in common, but also really express themselves very differently. Also, it must have been quite a nice place to be during the 2020 pandemic, to just be in your vineyards, not stuck in your home in London like I was.
No reason to complain at all. I think we, like all winemakers, paid so much attention to the vineyards in 2020, and I totally fell in love again with my home, because I realized things that I've never really experienced on such a day-by-day base, because you were just there day by day, and it was so great.
Yeah, that must have been, I think it's going to be like a common thing. The 2020 vintage all over the world is going to be the one that everyone has the most attention to detail on.
True.
Because no one could do much else other than just pay a lot of attention to their vines.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the Sals de Erde project, because I've mentioned it a few times, and some people probably don't know what I'm talking about, and some of you do. So just to give you a little bit of context to everyone else. So it's the salt of the earth, essentially. It's a project that Ben, who is one of the owners of the sourcing table, and Jamie, who was also very involved in the sourcing table as well, they partnered up with a friend of theirs called Daniel, who imports Zalto glasses to the UK, which are some of the best wine glasses that I've ever used. And every time I break one, I die a little bit inside because they're so beautiful and they are not cheap. But Daniel's, sort of like the king of what you should drink your wine out of, and is the person that brings those into the UK. So the three of them have this project, and the previous 3 years it was just an Albarino that they've been making with Elogio Primeres in Rioja Baix, which I can never pronounce because my pronunciation is always terrible in any language, but it's beautiful, and every year it's just been a really special wine blending of two vineyards. And then 2020 came along, and I got exceptionally excited when I found out that you were going to be making a wine for the project. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, and how you how you got involved, and how you guys ended up blending that, because it was obviously not as straightforward as being able to come visit you to do it.
No,
it's great wine.
Yeah, no, it's super. It was a super exciting request also, because I also heard about that story that there is an Albarino as a representative of the salt of the earth. And of course, there needs to be a Riesling next to it. And that was kind of like logical. When Ben told me that story, it felt like, yes, of course, we're bringing the Riesling to it as well. And we had these vineyards in Lorch, in the village in the west corner of the region, just taken over. Yes, so we're with the Salz der Erde, we're representing another village. Lorch is kind of like it's a little fairy tale village. It's like you feel so in the middle of nowhere there, because the valley gets so narrow and you don't really see anything but the vineyards next to you and the other side of the river. And this is the beautiful part of the Rhine Valley, where you have many castles around. So it is really like you feel it like you're in another time zone. And we got an offer to take over some vineyards there, and we did that in 2019 because we fell in love with the terroir and the spirit of that place. And then when Ben came up with that question, if we would be able to provide something that shows really what the Salz der Erde tastes like, I thought immediately, yes, Lorch, it is Lorch, because we have so much quartzite there. which always gives the wines a very crystalline, salty touch. And we have to learn for ourselves what these vineyards are offering us. So it's great to dig in with the project where you can kind of like free your mind as well. It would have been so great to have these three guys around, showing them this like mystery and magic of that place. But yes, it was vintage 2020, so they could not join for picking or experiencing the vineyards during the season. They unfortunately could also not join tasting the wines, but we made a digital blending session. So we sent samples of three potential lots that we had in mind would express that terroir idea very, very nicely. And then the result is a combination of two of these plots in two different sites, which is great because it kind of reflects also the other story of the Sal de Terra. So it's also a combination of two different places. And one is a little bit warmer and has a little bit more slate influence. And the other part is coming from a quartzite-driven vineyard, which is a little bit higher up in altitude, so a little bit tighter and a little bit, more straightforward in style. And it's a 60-40 blend of the tighter one versus the bit rounder and riper one. And I'm so hoping to be able to do the next blend tasting I hope there will be a next blend tasting, and then I hope to do it actually with the guys here, just to be able to show them what the place is about, because this is really what the seasoning of the earth is.
Well, I know that they're all itching to come and do that. The wine turned out beautifully, and I think it's just such a lovely sort of story between the two, because I mean Albarino is also a wine that I feel it has so much amazing potential in the world of fine wine, and to be something that's incredibly terroir expressive, especially in Galicia. But is often sort of the super easy fresh drinking white that you don't necessarily see look to see a huge amount of extra complexity in, which is completely untrue. And the wine that they made in the Sal de Terra they made is just remarkable. It's it's an Albarino that made me fall in love with Albarino, and realize how incredibly expressive it is, and this amazing salinity that comes from the soil. And then tasting yours as well, it's the same story, just of a different terroir. And your dog also is really excited about this wine, so I'm feeling the enthusiasm. I'm annoyed I didn't bring a bottle of the Sal de Terra to show you guys. It's also got the most beautiful label. It's just the whole thing.
It looks awesome. And it's so funny that Albarino means actually the white from the Rhine. And now finally, yes, Albarino is, if you translate it, it's Alba is the white and Rino is the River Rhine. So they called it the white grape from the Rhine because it has its roots somewhere there. It's not Riesling for sure, but it has a connection. And this is actually also really, really cool that now a Riesling from the Rhine is the next one in the game.
I did not know that. That's such a adds even more layers to the connection between the two projects. And we had them on, we put them up on the website this week and sort of sold some mixed cases of them, and it's just such a wonderful thing to be able to have those two wines for people to enjoy together as well, because the story is so cohesive and the wines are just gorgeous. And it makes me very excited to taste your other 2020s. You're saying you're doing some bottling today, as we're having a little chat before we started this. So
yeah, we actually bottled 21 already today. Cool. Yeah. But our lightest wines, the regional wines, will be combining these three places. Mm-hmm. So that was the one that reached bottle today. So the ones like the Village Riesling, the Rue de Sem Estate, or the Sal de Terra, they will get some longer time in the cellar. But there's always some Riesling needed when the sun starts to pop up and spring is knocking on the door. So yes, then we need fresh Riesling as well.
Yeah, that was definitely the sort of day it was today. It was sort of itching to taste some delicious Riesling. I guess I also, if we usually do these for about 45 minutes to an hour, has anyone got any questions at this stage that they'd love to ask Teresa? I mean, you've been absolutely amazing and covered so much about the
I'm
history.
sorry that I've been talking. I was just realizing that it's already 45 minutes.
The whole point of these. As I was saying to you before, I was like, I'm going to stop talking and just let you do all the talking, because this is the whole point. But you've covered everything so wonderfully. Yeah, I don't think anyone has any other questions at this stage. Imogen says, great, super educational session. Thank you so much. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time, Teresa. It was such a pleasure to run through everything that, to do with your estate. And I'm sure other people agree, but I feel particularly happy because I'm such a big fan. It's just really nice to be able to hear it all sort of one-on-one with everyone else. Osi says she had a list of questions, they were all answered. So brilliant. You preempted everything. So I've made the session's being recorded, so I'll chop my chat at the beginning and this probably a bit of chat at the end, and then give you a copy of it as well. But thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I always very much enjoy these, and lovely to see some of our wine club members and various lovely customers. And David says, fascinating session. We're looking forward to his Salt of the Earth wines. I'm very excited for you to taste them, David. Can't wait to hear your thoughts. And we'll be doing another one of these sessions with Josh Bergstrom later in April, which will be really exciting, and we'll talk about Oregon wines then. So continuing the terroir theme, but slightly different grape varieties.